Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, a certified grief educator, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one to one with me, and I'm one to one with psychotherapist Patrick Harris. Patrick is a fascinating guy. He was a witness to a shootout among rival biker gangs in Waco, Texas, in 2015. 9 people died in that, and then he went into psychotherapy. But he's also a clown with Patch Adams, so that's kind of counterintuitive because he also brings humor to his psychotherapy practice. So, Patrick, welcome to One to One.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We met in La Crosse, Wisconsin, my hometown, a couple of months ago, where we were both speaking at the International Conference for Death, Grief, and Bereavement. And I moderated a panel discussion on masculinity and grief, which we're going to get into shortly. But first, let's talk briefly about that Waco shootout, because you were a biker at the time, but these you weren't necessarily in a biker gang. So if you don't mind, walk us through that day. What happened?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I think when I look back on the chapters of my life, that one is a fairly random one, but I was in a motorcycle club for about 11, 12 years, I think, total. In that time, I was in a few different clubs. But at the time, we were going down to Waco, Texas. One interesting thing about bikers is that you typically belong to regional organizations because there's a lot of connection amongst that community. So similar to having like professional organizations like you would in any industry, there's the coalition of clubs and independents. So it was like a political action group that brought in not just motorcycle club members, but just anybody that owns a motorcycle is welcome to these. It is predominantly motorcycle clubs, but anyone on two wheels is welcome to go. And this is where they handle address issues like motorcycle legislation or laws that impact motorcycle legislation. So helmet laws. I think at the time they were working on something called the Dead Red Bill, where if intersections are weighted for their red lights, a motorcycle is never going to be heavy enough to set off the sensor. So other states have passed the Dead Red Bill that if it's cycled more than 2 times and you can safely run the red light, you can do so. So that was the purpose of the gathering. But there were two clubs that had been notoriously at odds with each other over the years, I believe, and both showed up that day. There was an altercation in the parking lot. I was just pulling up on my bike. I hadn't even gotten off yet. In fact, if you look at the crime scene photos from that day, you can see my bike in almost every one because I was about 10, 15 feet from the actual initial altercation and shootout. But yeah, fists turned into guns and people opened fire, and it was felt like an eternity, but I think a solid 3 minutes of just a barrage of bullets that left 9 dead, 18 wounded.
When the shooting started, what did you do? Did you hit the dirt?
One thing I am proud of myself is that I didn't lose my cool in that situation. I remember once the dust settled, I was like, oh wow, I thought through everything. Not that I would want to have to exercise that skill again, but there was just a very conscious effort of get off my bike. I had the wherewithal to put my kickstand down and turn off the bike. So initially hid behind my motorcycle as a barrier. It wasn't like a steady barrage of bullets. It was like bullets here, here, here. I think the last investigation found out the majority of the firing was coming from law enforcement, so it was very one sided. So anytime there was a lull in the shooting, I would kind of crawl behind the nearest car because we're in a parking lot. Then there'd be another lull that I would try to get just as far away as I could. But yeah, seeking shelter and just putting distance between me and what was going on was my biggest priority. I remember having a distinct thought of like, I need to record this, like, because the whole situation, well, obviously there's no normal mass shooting, but the whole situation just seemed weird from the start. And I remember having the distinct thought of having my cell phone like inside my vest right here. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable even doing this to pull out my phone to record for fear that an officer is going to think I'm going for a gun and shoot at me next.
Whoa. So you were able to see the cops? You were able to see the people shooting at each other?
Yes, unfortunately, there's a lot that's come out since the initial event. There was a lot of law enforcement saying they had some reports that something was going to happen. They didn't know what was going to happen, and then through over the years, through the actual investigation and discovery actually just being leaked to the public, found out the law enforcement actually knew a lot more than they led on to believe. There were poll cameras set up. I believe they had a sniper on like a nearby building, just waiting for all of this to happen. So that, yeah, within like the first hour, there was, I want to say, DEA, FBI, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and I believe the Texas Rangers were all there. But yeah, I was within feet of everything.
Yeah. And then you were arrested.
Yes, which obviously is something that I'm still very upset about, but it was, even that part was interesting too, because I was putting distance between me and the shooting. There was 4 members of my club that were there that day. Our president was in the front, I was in the back. 3 of us ran this way and our president ran this way because there was closer shelter to seek on his end. So after the initial dust settled, law enforcement came in and kind of taped off the crime scene. We couldn't find our president. We were worried, worst case scenario. So we're just kind of walking around where we can. Law enforcement said, if you're on this side of the crime scene tape, like just call a ride, go home. Like, this is a crime scene. And we're like, well, our bikes are in there. Are they going to come out tonight? They're like, nope, it's evidence. Just get out of here. So I called a buddy of mine who lived in Austin at the time. So it's about a 3.5-hour drive. He's on his way. And in the meantime, we're still looking for our president. Ultimately found him, thankfully. He was in handcuffs for a bit, and then they eventually got him up, took him out of his handcuffs. He called us. He said, I'm good. They just want to get my statement, and then we'll get out of here. So then, like, every 20, 30 minutes, he would send a text message, still good, still waiting. In the meantime, every time they found a bullet hole, they would push back the crime scene. So it got to the point where we couldn't even see him anymore. And then the text messages stopped on his end, and later found out that that's when they put cuffs on everybody ultimately. So then fast forward 3 hours later, my buddy is about 30 minutes outside of town. We're just sitting under a tree because that's where law enforcement told us to wait. When 4 or 5 officers come up, walked up, drew their weapons, told us to put our hands up, told us we're under arrest. Yeah, and then took us to jail. It was, and because we were separate than like the big crowd, we actually went straight to McLennan County Jail right from the crime scene. Everybody else was taken to the convention center for processing and like were processed as a group, but we were processed separately, which is why the next night, it was a Monday night, we were able to bond out. Drove back to Austin that night, woke up Tuesday morning, met with the lawyer. The lawyer said, this is madness. Like, you can't just arrest 200 people because they're all dressed the same. This will be fine. You'll be fine. We'll get through this. About 2 hours later, I get a call from our bondsman who was livid. He said that the judge went over his head, didn't even get a phone call. He read in the paper that morning that they recalled our bonds and they sent marshals out for us and reissued warrants for our arrest. And then so went back to the lawyer's office who said, this isn't really legal. Like, you can't really issue a bond, say just kidding, and then reissue a warrant for your arrest and not even go through the bondsman. So it just looks like you're running.
What were the grounds for the arrest?
Engaging in organized criminal activity. And they said we had the 2 out of the 3 that were with me had an additional weapons charge. And if you're wondering what the weapon was, it was their wallet chains, which is not a statute in Texas. There's no legal length or weight for a wallet chain, but they were classifying that as an illegal weapon, which is what they used to justify the arrest. I did not, but
Well, I was going to say, were you carrying any kind of weapon other than what they considered one?
I probably had a knife on me, but that was about it. So yeah, so went back to the lawyer's office. The lawyer said, it's not great, but if you don't turn yourselves in, it's going to look like you're running. So surrendered to the marshal's office in Austin, spent 2 nights in jail there. And then I found out later that the marshals went to the apartment I was living in, and I was working for the local mental health authority at the time. They sent marshals to like our main office where like our CEO and the C-suite is looking for me. And that was not the best. That employer was very supportive of the whole thing ultimately, but
Well,
yeah.
you were in school at the time too, right?
Yeah, so
And
I
a
was
straight A student, if I'm not mistaken.
I definitely not a straight A student in undergrad, but when I got my stuff
Welcome,
together, in my
welcome to the
master's,
club.
yeah. But yeah, I was working on my master's in counseling at St. Edward's University at the time.
So
But
then how did this was in 2015. So that was a long time ago. How did it all how did it all work out?
it hasn't, unfortunately.
Really?
I think I spent a total of 11 days in jail because even after the Austin, I woke up one morning and the jailers were like, Harris, you're getting out. And I felt like that was too good to be true because I didn't even talk to my lawyer. And I was like, I'm getting out. And they're like, yeah. And then so I go downstairs. And then right when we get through the elevator, the SWAT team is there with like Hannibal Lecter shackles, where I was like shackled here and there and escorted us back to Waco, spent another 8 days there and upped our bond to $2 million. And this whole experience has made me more mindful of like bonds that get issued for these high profile like cases. I've never seen another $2 million bond. Like it is absolutely wild.
So how was your case adjudicated? Did you actually go on trial?
No, so I was there was a handful that were indicted, and then there was I don't remember the ultimate number. I think it was less than 100 were not indicted, but they wouldn't. There was no charges to drop technically since there wasn't an indictment. But at no point did Waco wanted to admit any sort of culpability because obviously like the lawsuit liability that comes with that. So they held this big grandstanding press conference and they issued refusal to prosecute. And it was one final jab in there was even though probable cause still exists for prosecution, we're diverting judicial resources to more culpable entities, basically. And it's like basically they were saying that like we still think you're guilty, but we got bigger fish to fry. And I was so livid when that happened.
Yeah, and as I understand it, out of those 200 people who were arrested, um, no one was convicted, and the one trial that happened ended up in a mistrial because of a hung jury. Am I right?
Yeah. It, yeah, there's a combination of factors like just a profound mishandling of evidence. The officers were just piling weapons; they didn't catalog it. There was just straight up missing evidence. They wouldn't even release our personal property. I don't think I got my. They took my vest, they took rings, they took cell phones, wedding rings, everything. I don't think we got it back for like 3 years, 2 or 3 years. Um, but yeah,
So
when
I suppose arguably, the people who were killed were the ones, right in the thick of things. So, um, and there's plenty of video of it happening, right?
yeah,
Have you seen it? Have you seen the video?
I have, unfortunately. I've seen those videos during discovery. My attorney showed me some of the poll camera videos that weren't released, and it was brutal. There was a gentleman, his road name was Mohawk. He didn't belong to any club. He was just there as an independent motorcycle rider. This guy was probably 100 pounds soaking wet, but former Marine, tough as nails. But he had to been in the 60s or 70s. This is caught on video too. A biker pulled a gun, was aiming it at somebody, and this guy tackled him and tried to save a life, and then ultimately got taken out by that initial shooter's guys. And like that was such an unnecessary. It was all unnecessary deaths, but
Jeez.
that he didn't deserve to die. It was horrible.
Yeah. Did you have any kind of a conscious thought that, this could be it? Were you afraid? How would you describe your emotions at the time?
It was just more survival. I don't remember fear necessarily as much as just being generally like rattled. I will say that was the first time I've ever felt anything close to like an outer body experience. And it wasn't even until I was in my jail cell. Like I remember vividly that night just staring at the wall, thinking like that same level of consciousness when you're having a bad dream and you become aware that you're in a dream where it's like I need to wake up. Like that sense of like derealization really kicked in. And I was just like, there's no way this is happening.
Were you expecting anything? I mean, did you know you were actually coming to a fairly potentially volatile situation?
No. The law enforcement apparently knew because that was the other stuff that came out in the discovery was they approached the business that was hosting the event saying that you need to cancel it. This isn't unsafe. It's like I feel like if they really felt that they had something to be afraid of, that this should have been more well known. But for as notorious as bikers are for being just aggressive or however they're displayed in the movies, it is such a profound culture of like respect. And the thought of this happening, especially at that scale in this state, never crossed my mind.
So it's been 11 years. You've had plenty of time to process this. How would you describe your your emotional evolution from the time of the shooting to where you are now?
It's been rough because like I said, they never dropped the charges, so this still pops up randomly. I got passed over for a job with the state because it popped up on a background check. I got kicked out of my apartment because it popped up on a background check. When I finished my master's and applied for my license as a psychotherapist in the state of Texas, they didn't want to issue me my license. So it derailed a lot, unfortunately. And then,
Is it,
I come from 3 generations of law enforcement. My great uncle Roy was the first Hispanic police officer in the city of Houston. And ever since then, every relative, aunts, uncles, cousins, parents, mom, dad, stepdad, all law enforcement. To have such a profound respect for law enforcement, to then have such a visceral reaction of seeing law enforcement was very jarring. Like, I didn't choose it, but anyone in a uniform was just so triggering of a complex combination of just anxiety and anger and visceral hatred. And it was not a comfortable place to be. And I even tried processing that with some of my relatives who, when I was considering filing the lawsuit, and I remember sitting with like at least 5 family members who are active law enforcement saying like, I feel, it could have been either one of y'all, right? Like, what if y'all were there that day just doing your job? And it was ultimately one of my cousins. He's since passed away now, but he said, F them. They knew what they were doing. You need to sue anybody that even looked at you that day. Go for it. And then so that gave me the confidence and motivation.
Did the bringing the lawsuit have any impact in a positive way on your emotions?
No. Honestly, well, it's been 11 years and it hasn't moved. I mean, it's a cat and mouse game of one side gets a ruling they don't like and then they appeal and then that kicks the can down the road. I think it's going back to the Fifth Circuit of Appeals right now and sitting on a judge's desk. So, I mean, there's a little glimmer of hope that maybe I'll at least recoup the $30,000+ I lost just proving my innocence and legal fees and bonds. But as far as like a big payday, no. If anything, there is an element of like it keeps the wound open because 1, I can't get my record expunged until the lawsuit's over because it might seal important records. And 2, like every time I get an email from my attorney with an update, I still just get that pit in my stomach where this should be a good thing. This should be my only chance for justice. But like I don't hesitate to even open the email half the time.
I would think I would not be surprised if cynicism and rage are probably, very much part of your daily existence.
Not so much now, but definitely that first year. I had this weird, there wasn't necessarily like fear of death, but there was this weird preoccupation with like, I could have died. That's the closest near-death experience I've ever had. And I had this weird response to that for the year afterwards. I was engaging in a lot of really unsafe behavior. I was a borderline functioning alcoholic for a little bit because at night I had trouble going to sleep once I got out of jail because I kept waking up thinking I was still in jail. So then that started disrupting my sleep. And then I started getting this weird anxiety about going to sleep, knowing that I was going to dream about being in jail. So then I would like take a melatonin and go to sleep and then have a nightcap and a melatonin and go to sleep. And then that wore off. Then 2 nightcaps and a melatonin. Thankfully, it didn't impact like school or work or functioning or anything like that. And it was only in the evenings that I was drinking, but it was drinking a lot. And then I would, not drinking and driving, but separately would be driving my motorcycle without a helmet at high speeds because I had this element of like, you don't get to tell me when I die. I get to be in charge of that. And I don't know why that was my weird trauma brain's way of exercising that. But yeah, I mean, when I look at that 1.5 to 2 years post Waco, that is a completely unrecognizable person.
You were already planning to go into psychotherapy. Am I right at that?
Mm-hmm.
And what motivated you to want to choose that career path?
That's probably the dumbest answer. Is I was originally a music major when I went off to college. Uh, I
Yeah, there's a
just,
lot of money there, or there can be.
especially marching tuba. I was gonna just be rolling in the money, but I got burnt out about a year and a half into it. Music was such a passion, but when it became to feel like work, it's not something that I wanted to pursue anymore. And I remember having like a midlife crisis at 19, trying to figure out like what other passions or interests that I have or what I could possibly do. And one day I just got frustrated and I was like, you know what? Whoever the next person that's next to me in class, whatever their major is, that's what I'm going to switch to next semester. So huge gamble. And I remember it was a guy named Jake who lived in my dorm and he had tattoos and piercings. He was a really cool guy. And I thought it was going to be something fun like photography or journalism or something really cool. And no, he was studying psychology. I forgot why he was studying psychology, but the next semester I took a intro class and a forensic psychology class. Ironically, both classes I teach now, but fell in love with it. And then from there, I was a professional musician for about 2 years after my undergrad, but then I got my first job working for the local mental health authority and just fell in love. And a few years into that, I realized I lack a lot of like the necessary tools to be an effective clinician, so that I would have to go back and get my master's. So that's what led to that decision.
Did Waco in any way rattle that decision, or did it only increase your resolve to go in this direction?
Oh no, it only increased my passion of helping people. If anything, it also helped with empathy, knowing what it's like to be in, even in a momentary blip of my whole existence, like what it's like to be in a persecuted group, just to be targeted like that and to be in an unfair system. That's people, a whole group of people's daily reality. And that was just uncomfortable for the, year that I dealt with it.
Well, this brings up. I want to show this. This is you, and were you dressed like this on the day of the shooting?
I was in a different club, but I don't think no, I didn't have the mohawk yet. The mohawk was my existential crisis because I started getting gray hairs on the side of my head, so I had to go full juvenile hairstyle. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, more or less, that's what I look like as a biker.
Oh my God. Um, and the 177, I guess that tattoo on your on the back of your left arm is the in memory of the people who were taken into prison or taken into jail, into custody.
Yeah, I think that was the ultimate number is 177, and you can't see it too well in that picture, but it says $2 million club, and that's to commemorate my $2 million bond. Since that's
Oh.
what the state of Texas felt that I was worth as a bond, that's what I'm hoping I get as a my lawsuit, but we'll see.
Okay, now I'm going to be devil's advocate for just a second because, and you've mentioned this, so I feel I'm justified in talking about it because let's just back up. There's been a shooting, 9 people are dead, and the cops are still trying to sort it out to try to figure out who's a player in this and who isn't. And so anybody who looks like this is fair game as far as they're concerned. And so my question is, and I think that this is a fair question, um, isn't it understandable that someone who looks like this is frightening to the rest of society?
Uh, well, I mean, those are two different questions, right? Like, they're looking at everybody that looks like this on the scene.
Right.
What my pushback to that would be, I mean, we are not shy of who our affiliation is, right? Like this picture perfectly encapsulates like what's important to a club member, right? You have the club name at the top, you have kind of like your area where you're from at the bottom, and then you have your club's insignia. It is very clear who I'm aligned with by who I'm wearing a matching vest with.
Well,
So
my
for law
mom, my
enforcement,
mom would say you're aligned with Satan.
mine probably would too.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but no, I mean everybody has their unique colors. There's no overlap in colors. The law enforcement knew ahead of time who was at war with each other. They could just look at our backs to see what team we play on. That would be like going to the World Cup and like trying to arrest the German team and just picking up everybody because you don't know who the German team is. Like it's very
Mhm.
clear based on like what we were wearing.
Okay, but let me just back up. Um, what is it about? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this because, you know, I can I'm projecting to a certain extent, and you understand what that is better than I do. I come from La Crosse, Wisconsin. 50,000 people. Middle of the road. My parents were Nixon Republicans. My job as a kid growing up was, don't get out of your lane. Be normal. Follow the crowd, and this is the antithesis of what I would have been like growing up in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so I guess my question is, this is an identity that you're projecting. So what's going on inside? What's the message that you're trying to give to people who are looking at you and making an assessment about you?
Who cares? Like it seems like a dismissive answer, but that's the
Uh-huh.
whole draw to the biker lifestyle. It has a very rich history. It's a bunch of World War II vets that came back after fighting for liberties and all of the rights that they want to exercise as soon as they get home. It was a bunch of war buddies that got together, didn't want to lose that bond, all got into motorcycle. They were all mechanics that have got into motorcycles. There's a fantastic book called The Original Wild Ones. It's about a club called the Booze Fighters specifically and tells kind of their upbringing. I think the best description was there's a movie actually loosely based on the club or the Booze Fighters origins. I think it was James Dean. I forgot who it was, but it's called I think it was just called The Wild Ones. And it shows them going to like Hollister and having a big party. And he meets a cute bartender and they're having drinks by the lake. And she was like, why do you do all of this? Why do you live this lifestyle? And he gives the perfect answer, which is, you spend the whole week getting wound up. You just get tightened like a screw. And sometimes you just need the weekends to just release the tension. And it's, most bikers, if you actually sat down and met the bikers, there's still that rich like military history. There's doctors, there's lawyers, there's therapists, there's people from all walks of life. And it's not even reserved for us hooligans. There's law enforcement clubs. There's a lot of national police officer motorcycle clubs. There's paramedic EMT clubs. There's all female clubs. There's a great one out of Corpus Christi, Texas. They all wear these like white, purple, bedazzled vests. They're some of the coolest women I've ever met. They're just people from all walks of life that just want to exercise freedom, and it doesn't really matter what other people think. It's as long as you're minding your own business.
Okay, so you're a psychotherapist now, and I would imagine that you've got men who are your clients in many cases. I'm sure have female clients as well. But one of the things, I mean, the panel that you were on that I moderated in La Crosse was on masculinity and grief. And in fact, I'd be interested in your observation about this because it's my observation that guys, and I don't want to generalize, but in my experience, guys tend to hold it in. It's a sign of weakness to cry. It's a sign of weakness to admit any kind of vulnerability. Our job is to handle it. But the women in my life get it. They cry easily. It's an emotional safety valve. And my impression is that what we see happen, if you look at the mass shootings in this country, without exception, all of the mass shooters are guys. And my hunch is that they've let the grief and the pain and the anger fester, and it's been corrosive so that in extreme situations, the tears become bullets. Am I right in that perception?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I mean, I do think I just anecdotally I've noticed a kind of turn in the tides where I'm now seeing this isn't intentional, but I think the majority of my caseload are men because one, there's not a lot of male therapists. Two, there's not a lot of male therapists that look like me with like tattoos and facial piercings and stuff. So I do think I attract a particular demographic. But it is interesting to see the men that are coming to therapy now, I don't think would have even entertained the thought of therapy 10 years ago. So that's cool. Like, there's less stigma. It's talked about way more. People are very open about their mental health. I think employers are a lot more diligent about emphasizing mental health, which is nice. But that still doesn't change the fact that the world doesn't create safe spaces for men to experience or emote, right? Like it's whether that's like a product of our own doing, it's not the burden of responsibility is not going to fall on one single person or demographic, but men should be getting more comfortable with opening up. The world should be more receptive of that, but it's still very rigid gender roles and expectations, unfortunately.
So, how do you get guys talking on a deep level about what's going on inside of them?
Very, very slowly,
It's
very
slow, huh?
patiently. Yeah, I mean, I think I got kind of best or worst of both worlds. My biological father passed away when I was 5, so I was raised by primarily sassy Latina women. My mom was a single mom police officer raising 2 kids, which was really cool. I don't think my aunt was married at the time. My grandmother wasn't married at the time, and yeah, I was just surrounded by strong women. The matriarch of our family is my aunt Stella, who's just like hyper intelligent, great genealogist. Like I just had such great inspiration. Then on the other side, my mom remarried, and I got a stepdad later on down the road who was just the epitome of just white Texan male. Just I know you're not from Texas, but just picture what you think a white Texas male police officer is: former Marine, thick accent, more guns than he knew what to do with. Um, Kind of came in and tried to overcorrect, but he brought in a lot of that kind of social expectations of what boys should be. I remember one time I was crying about something, and he made me stand at the end of the driveway so like neighbors can see what a little boy crying looks like because boys aren't supposed to cry. And
Mm.
just like both of those, like one foot in, emotions are cool, the other foot in, emotions not. I think was a good thing because it started making me question like where is the truth in that. So having that lived experience of what it is like to have emotional restrictions and um, I think that's kind of informed just being patient. I think that's where a lot of humor comes in because humor is a real nice way to safely express an emotion. And
Mhm.
even like if you just pay attention to how millennials, my generation communicates, it's a lot of LOLs. And I really think that's like a safe way to kind of like let emotion sneak in and be like, LOL, just kidding, LOL. But it's like a safe way just to sprinkle in a little vulnerability here and there.
Well, this is the perfect time to bring in your association with Patch Adams. That's him on the left there. You are on the right, and Patch's partner there is in the front. How did you get involved with Patch Adams? And explain for some people who may not be familiar who he is. Talk about that.
Yeah, a lot of the audience might recognize the name from the 1998 Robin Williams film that chronicled his life and start in medical school. And he was a pioneer in really introducing humor into clinical spaces. Obviously, you can see it in this picture. Clowning was his avenue for doing that. He's great. The movie is fantastic, but it captures a small percentage of just how profoundly impressive he is. He is very intelligent, near eidetic memory, has 8 hours of poetry memorized,
Hmm.
tremendously funny, big social justice warrior, big hippie too. He's great. But I, my very first job in mental health, I was doing community-based mental health in Houston, working with a largely unhoused population. It was the severely mentally ill population, so primary diagnosis of schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar disorder. And a few months into it, I started getting really burnt out and overwhelmed. I don't really get anxious, but I found myself having anxiety attacks. I had weird, intense, like emotional waves that was just like indicative of the level of burnout. And it was a tough job. I mean, you were seeing people at their worst. It was really hard to leave work at work because, my day ends and I could go home and lay in a bed, but I had clients that were out on the streets that I didn't know would I see them the next day. And I remember flipping through channels one weekend and the movie was on and I thought to myself, like, I think this was based on a real guy. And I found Patch's website, read some of his books or the 2 books that he had written, and fell in love with this concept of just because you're doing serious work doesn't mean you have to do it in such a serious way. And I saw that he had put on workshops every year. And I think this was probably 2012, 2013. And it wasn't until the year after Waco that I finally got to go to a workshop. I remember it was one of my sleepless nights that I'd woken up from one of the nightmares, that I was just kind of doom scrolling through my phone, and I saw that the next workshop was coming up, and I was like, dang, if there was ever a better time to do it, this is it. So I just put everything on my credit card that I didn't have the money to pay for at the time. But I'm so glad I did, because I met him, got to go to the Gesundheit Land out in West Virginia, and just fell in love with humor. And I wasn't sold on clowning quite yet, but yeah, it I wouldn't be half the clinician or educator I am today if it wasn't learning how immensely powerful humor can be for connection, for social bonding, for reframing, for permission giving, even retention. Like, if I can make a boring lecture funny, students are going to take something away from that.
Well, and a lot of people who are newly bereaved, I mean, that's just that, that's a gut punch. And I can remember, being in situations like that where, you know, someone's laughing, and it's like, don't you understand, my world has ended. And, how can you even find humor in this? And not in my situation, but how can anybody laugh again? And do you encounter that? Do you deal a lot with people who are dealing with grief?
It's not one of my main clinical focus. In fact, I did everything I could early on in my career to avoid it as much as possible, but grief's always going to be there. Like, even if you don't want to specialize it, you're going to be 2 years into working with somebody, they're going to lose somebody, and it would be wildly inappropriate to refer them out and be like, "Oh, I'm not the grief therapist. Like, let me send you to my buddy." But the more familiar I came with it, it all depends on what is the joke. Because even in the situation like death, that's not a funny situation, but the absurdity of a situation is where we can kind of reclaim some of that power. I remember my stepdad passed away several years ago from ALS, and it was just a profoundly difficult time to watch somebody who's so full of life become entombed in their body. And we were very fortunate that he was able to have home hospice, and he was able to pass away at home, and it was surrounded by friends and family, and it was the best way to go. But he expired around 2 a.m. The coroner got there around like 4 a.m, and everybody's just physically and emotionally exhausted. We're just silently sitting in the living room with him, and coroner comes in, and they're being very gentle, and it's like, are you ready for us to take them away? And before I could even, like, my thought could stop my brain, or my mouth could stop my thoughts, I just said, in Houston, we have high occupancy lanes where you can ride for free if you have 3 or more people. And oftentimes people have like mannequins in the back seat to try to get into that lane. So the first thought that came to my mind was like, hey, we got some sunglasses and hats if you want to put it on them and do a weekend at Bernie's situation to get on the HOV lane. And as soon as I said it, I was like, this was the dumbest thing to say in this moment. Like, my mom is right here, the family's right here. And there was just like a moment of like, did he really just say that? And
did it land? Did the joke land?
It did. But
did it really?
Yeah, I think it was just the absurdity of the situation, not the death, not the pain, but just the absurdity.
Have you always considered yourself a funny person?
I think I've always been a goofy person. I entertain myself, and I think that's all I've cared about at a certain point. And then when I started learning about therapeutic humor, I want to use that instrumentally, but I don't know. As long as I laugh, I think it's.
Do you think most people have a sense of humor? I mean, what is it? I mean, I've never really thought about it that much, but have you deconstructed humor and what makes things funny? And are people by nature funny? How would you analyze all that?
I think anybody has the capacity for it. I think the degree to which we appreciate it, or even in a cognitive or emotional state to acceptance, definitely varies. But I don't know if you have pets. I have dogs. I mean, dogs are goofy. Like they do it for no other reason than to bring joy to somebody else. That's their own like demonstration of humor. I think everybody has a different stuff. I'm forgetting the researcher's name. One is Martin, and I'm forgetting the other one. Did research, this big factor analysis research of all the different types of humor, slapstick humor, knock knock jokes, all of that. And factor analysis is like when you have so many variables, you're trying to find commonalities and just make like broad categories rather than having 100 different styles. So they whittled it down to 4, which I believe is aggressive, affiliative, I can't believe I'm blanking on the other, self-enhancing and self-deprecating, where like gallows humor, silly for being silly, making fun of others, all of that. And I think everybody's has a capacity to be on that spectrum of funny. It's just going to be what is there. Like growing up, there was this priest that I really loved. He was just a brilliant man, very dry and very sarcastic. And a lot of people misread him and just thought he was the biggest jerk. He was very condescending. I thought he was one of the funniest people I've ever met because he would just walk around during the homily and this is after, in Catholic Mass, they read a part of the Bible for the first, second, and gospel readings. He would walk around with a microphone and say, so as we learn in the gospel reading with John said, and he would put the microphone in front of random people. And if they didn't remember, he'd be like, well, the missalet's right there if you want to go ahead and pop it open and read it out loud. I thought he was the funniest person ever, but humor is
he was doing crowd work.
Yeah. But that subjectivity is where there's so much disparity in what people find funny or how funny people. Yeah. But the one thing I talk about, and I actually just gave a lecture on this last night, is, humor isn't humorous to everybody. You have to be in a very specific mental state to accept it because our brains do this thing so a part of the brain called the amygdala is this kind of like filter where our thoughts get filtered through our emotional state at the time. So if we're happy, we tend to think more happy and optimistic thoughts. If we're angry, we tend to default to more negative and pessimistic thoughts. If you're not in a good mood, it's really hard to accept humor, and you might misread humor as a threat, and you might get more offended, especially with like trauma. A lot of people with traumas, their brains are rewired in a sense to like perceive things as it's kind of the opposite. Like most people accept things as benign until we register as a threat, versus a lot of trauma brains register everything as a threat until they're told it's benign. So there's definitely times to not use it. But yeah, I think everybody has the capacity to be funny or appreciate funny.
Fascinating. And I just want to remind our viewers that, we're live. And if you do have a question, you can put it in the chat because, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about this mind-body medicine and healthcare burnout. These are some of the things that you also specialize in. Talk about healthcare burnout, and also tell us what mind-body medicine is all about.
Yeah, I'll start with the latter. Mind-body medicine is a kind of like niche field in healthcare. The short of it is just recognizing that our body is just one complete system. So we need to treat illnesses holistically rather than in isolation. And the reason I found my way into it was pretty early on in my career. I worked in our city, one of our city's first truly integrated clinics where they were merging primary medical and mental health services. And that I don't know why that concept seems so foreign to me, but there's nothing that happens physically that doesn't also impact you cognitively or emotionally, and vice versa. Like take depression, for example. Like we tend to treat that as a mental health issue, that it alters our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. But our body also has an inflammatory response to depression. If you get a virus or a bacteria or an infection, your body raises its core temperature. That's what inflammation is. You get a fever to try to kill off whatever is in there that shouldn't be in there that's making you sick. Our body does the exact same thing to depression. It's treated as a metabolic disorder now because it changes our energy levels. Our body's trying to fight off this infection that's not a real infection, because it's not just an illness of the mind, it's an illness of the body. And we have to be able to treat everything as a whole. Otherwise, we're just focusing on one narrow aspect of it. So the greater field of mind-body medicine is just looking at holistic ways. My PhD work is in mind-body medicine, but with an even more narrow niche of integrated mental health. So the focus of my studies are on complementary and alternative modalities for mental health care other than just traditional psychotherapy or medication, because those are great, but they only get us so far. We also got to pay attention to diet and social time and exercise and all of that stuff that we don't typically associate with mental health, but is still profoundly important.
Okay.
And then the healthcare burnout, I kind of stumbled upon that through Patch, and then really dove into it during the pandemic because that's when our healthcare system was very, very much stress test. But my passion there is something that's not very that not, well, it's not talked about enough, which is physician suicide actually has surpassed veteran suicide as a result of this concept known as moral injury, where people get into this field, they want to be healers, they want to help people, but they're so restricted and limited in their ability to provide quality person-centered care because of just how broken our healthcare system is right now. Healthcare cost in this country is the number one reason people file for bankruptcy. I mean, just think about, like, we're such a hyper capitalistic society. You would think it would be getting behind on like house payments or car payments or luxury items. Like, no, like our fighting to have the audacity to live and survive an illness is the number one reason we get file for bankruptcy. And then so that just leads to more restrictive things from like insurances, things that are reimbursable versus not. Physicians spend 5 to 10 minutes maybe with patients and then have all the charting and follow-up phone calls and everything. And we're losing more physicians each year than we're gaining, either through moving to other countries, retirement, leaving the field altogether. We're losing more than we're getting new physicians graduating medical school. So at some point, it's going to be a bigger problem that we can't ignore anymore. So it's a lot. My heart really goes out to healthcare professionals because they're doing the Lord's work, as they say. It's a real tough job.
So what's next for you? You're a psychotherapist, so you have a practice. You also teach at Texas State University. Is that where you're
Yeah, I'm
teaching?
full-time faculty at Texas State, which is also my alma mater. So I'm a little biased as it is the best state university in Texas. And then I also adjunct at St. Edward's University.
So teaching, and is it safe to assume you're going to be doing more research as well?
I am right now. My I've kind of pivoted my research. I have a study coming out later this year on pranking behaviors, like personality styles behind pranking behaviors, because I'm quite the prankster myself, and I'm curious of that. But I have this kind of new interest and passion. One cool thing that Texas State does is we have this thing called the Discovery Center, where it works with undergrads who are interested in like dipping their toes in research. So you get matched with a faculty member who has an area of expertise in what they want to study, and then the faculty member guides them through the research process and co-author something and gets it published. And that's really cool. And I was thinking, I'm in a bunch of psychotherapist groups on Facebook, and I often see people posting like, how does one, get involved in research? How do you do this without having any resources? And I was like, oh, well, I've got one foot in both worlds. So right now my passion is trying to find independent researchers that don't have a background in research that have really great ideas and trying to work with them. So that's kind of disrupting a niche that I'm trying to carve out to myself. But I really want to make research accessible to people because that's just really how we move forward as a society and as a field.
Do
Um,
you see yourself doing writing?
Yeah. Right now, ironically, circling back to our law enforcement discussion, right now I'm working with one of my grad students to do a study on law enforcement burnout, and what strategies are available, what strategies are law enforcement gravitating towards with burnout, either adaptive or maladaptive, to just see where we're at as far as like what they're doing. So that's something I'm actively working on. I have a humor anthology book that I'm slowly working on with the Association for Applied Therapeutic Humor. And then I'm writing my first textbook on cognitive behavioral therapies. But after that, I think I'm going to kind of like refocus my niche and get back to therapeutic humor specifically.
Fascinating. Let's make sure that people can contact you if they're interested. You're on, probably the best way to get in touch with you is on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/the Patrick Harris. And Man, oh man, I enjoyed our time together in La Crosse. It was great getting to know you there, and um, it's exciting to see someone who is passionate about what really is important in life, and mortality, masculinity, deep emotions. You're really dealing with some important stuff. So, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to get into that you wanted to talk about?
I, the concept of masculinity is interesting, and just kind of like tie all the topics together. Jail wasn't horrible, which is weird to say. It was just more boring than anything else because my case was so weird. I was like the poster child for everything. So my name, address, everything was on the news. They had like a map of Austin. They showed where I live. It was a whole thing. It was bad. But one thing that did do for me was that put me in protective custody in jail. So it was just me and the two others from my club. Um, so to fill my time, I started cataloging, because I'm a nerd. I started cataloging all the graffiti that I saw, and I was in the gang unit, so it was mostly like gang stuff where you could see it. And then one day I was like laying down. I was on the ground, which is, don't lay down in jail. It's really gross. But I was like trying to stretch my back or something, and I noticed underneath the table there was some graffiti there too. So I got under it, and then I started being curious, where else is there hidden graffiti? Anywhere that there was like an accessible place to write something, that was positive and vulnerable. Anywhere that was visible to everyone was like gang tough guy talk, like F you, and I'm going to do this. So I should have found the book before coming, because I actually wrote it all down. But that was super interesting. And then also I was across, it wasn't as like in jail where you get these cool like steel bars where you can just kind of like sit there. It was a big plexiglass window, and you could see into the cell of the person across from us. And there was like 8 people in that cell. And that was really interesting, just from like an anthropological point of view, of seeing how there were a bunch of MS-13 guys. And I know that because they had 13 tattoos across their face, but they would make dinner together every night. I would watch them take ramen noodles and make a dough out of it, and make pizza together. They'd pull their commissary and make stuff. They would sit down and pray. They just knuckle to knuckle and pray. There was one guy that like, he was always in the back just like drawing and drawing. And anytime like somebody would walk by the window to go to rec time, he would like fiercely like shuffle through his papers and like find the best drawing, and then go over and like show everybody. And a lot of people would give him a thumbs up and a fist bump. And you just see on his face like he just needed that validation. And that was really interesting to witness as well. I mean, the vulnerability is there. It's just that these guys need a healthier outlet for it. I think, one of my motorcycle clubs, I remember I had a bulldog named Bruce, who was the best dog that's ever lived, but he passed away in my arms, and it was really rough. And I didn't leave my home for like a week after that. But the first outing I did, I was meeting my brothers for a drink. And when I told them I wasn't going to something, they knew that my dog had died. And I just got the usual, like, that sucks, bro. Like, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And then when I was with them, I think there was 8 of us there that day. It was funny because like as a group, they're like, I'm glad to see you out. That's cool. At some point in like the 4 hours we were there, at least everybody, at least once, one-on-one would come up and be like, man, when my dog died, I cried for like a week and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't do anything. Like I just couldn't even like get out of bed. And so, like that vulnerability would come out one-on-one, but not in a group that would threaten their identity within the group. And that's always stuck with me too. Like it's not that men lack vulnerability. It's they lack the safety to be vulnerable. Well, sometimes we do it to ourselves, either because we won't accept it.
What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of?
Not being man enough. I think that's it. It's just that, men don't cry. There's also this concept, I think I was talking about this in lacrosse. I'm forgetting the actual name for it, but there is this weird diminished returns because we have like societal's expectations of masculinity. And so like that comes with the rejection of femininity. But there's also this threshold that if you pass, like if you're so masculine, like you're a pro boxer, MMA fighter, like action star, the more masculine you get, the more permission you get to be more feminine. So if you watch a lot of these like big alpha, like MMA fighters are wearing like very like pastel colors and floral prints. And like they were the first ones to pioneer like the man purse, like cross satchel bags and stuff that would be considered traditionally feminine if someone not hyper masculine would engage in. But once we pass that threshold of masculinity. So it's all a social construct. It's not necessarily written in our DNA. Like we are more physical and rambunctious and all of that, but like that vulnerability is still there.
Let me take a risk here. What's your take on the current thinking? This is summer of 2026. Trump is president for the second time, and there is basically a war on trans. The what's going on with the whole trans thing? What is it that's so upsetting for a person to feel as if they're trapped in the body of the wrong gender?
What's like their struggle or like society's struggle with
Society. I'm wondering what's going on in the MAGA mind that this is somehow a big deal.
I think with politics, regardless of like what side of the aisle, we've made topics political talking points. And then, for better or for worse, other hot topics are abortion, immigration issues, I don't know, other random big talking points, right? But as soon as you label something as a political issue, then you create like a focal point for where your place is in the in group. So if you're a Republican and this is one of your talking points, so we'll use like trans rights or abortion or one of those, right? Like, okay, we've decided as Republicans, like I'm not going to accept this one thing. So now that's part of that identity. And the more you embrace that ideology, the closer you are to the in group. If you don't embrace that ideology or you don't have a strong opinion of it, the further away you are from like being the dead center of that in group. We want to be the most prototypal representative of an in group. And this goes beyond politics too. This is the same thing with like men. Like our social ideas of masculinity is that focal point. And the more masculine you are, the more of a man you are. The further away, the more threat we have of losing that group identity. And now we're in the out group. And then so even if these aren't rational thoughts, being in an out group from the group that we want to be a part of threatens our survival at like a primal level. We're just so hardwired for acceptance. And once we've decided this is a group I want to be accepted by, I've got to be real close to that, whatever that perfect prototype of this group is. Otherwise, I'm going to get kicked out. And that's a bummer because that really takes away any ability to find like a center point in the conversation. If like we're in this binary, like, you've got to be for this or against it, and you've got to be on one of the extremes to be the perfect prototypes of this group affiliation. So just really,
it's very tribal, very tribal.
Yeah, very primal, very tribal. It's unfortunate because it really stalls progress and compromise.
We could go on for a long time. We've been talking with Patrick Harris, a psychotherapist in Austin, Texas. Fascinating, as you all know, fascinating. And let me just go through your contact information again, just so that people can contact you if they're interested on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/the Patrick Harris. I'm John DeDakis. You've been one-to-one with me, and I'll give you my quick contact information if I can find it, which is my website, which is johndedakis.com. And Patrick, this has been fascinating. I so appreciate your taking the time. I certainly want to talk again next time. The beer is on me, and thanks very much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.